I'm Henry Lack. I'm the president of the Arts Alliance of Greater Bloomington. It's my pleasure to be working with the city of Bloomington and with Constellation Stage and Screen. Together we put together this evening. I want to give you just a brief overview of what's going to happen tonight. We're going to start the evening with our new mayor speaking, and we'll introduce her in a moment. And then Sally Gaskell is going to speak and talk about what's gone on in Bloomington over the last whatever how many years. And then we're going to introduce Natalia Almanza, who's a current young person and leader in the arts in the community, and she will talk about where are we right now and what are our opportunities. And after that, we're going to turn the evening over to Gabe, who's going to work as a moderator for the panel this year. We're going to ask them various questions, and we will give you time near the end. We're going from 7 to 8:30. So in the last 15 minutes or so, if you have questions or you want to ask them of Gabe or of the panelists, we can do that. Before we go on, however, I want to just alert you to a new initiative of the Arts Alliance of Greater Bloomington. You've received tonight rack cards. And we're now instituting a brand new arts directory. We want to get as many people on it as possible. Very easy to get on. You just go to bloomingtonarts.org and sign up. If you need a photo and a bio, you can add video or whatever. But we want to help you to promote yourself and promote the arts within our city. Our mission is to help communicate and support the arts and culture in our city, and that's part of it. Also, I want to mention that for the first time, the AAGB is cooperating, working with 100th Hill. We're doing a youth arts camp, and the sign up for that is coming near. It's for kids aged 10 through 13, and it's June 10th, 11th, 11th, and 12th. So if you have somebody that's interested in going up and camping, it's a daytime camp up at the 100th Hill, that would be great. So to begin the evening, to not run on, I'd like to introduce a very important person to you from our community, and that's Holly Warren, who's our Assistant Director for the Arts, and she will introduce our mayor. Thank you, Holly.
Hey everyone, this is awesome. Thank you for filling the room. Bloomington Arts Week. As I mentioned, my name is Holly Warren. I'm the Assistant Director for the City of Bloomington. I'm the Assistant Director for Arts for the City of Bloomington. I'm going to kick us off with the city's land and labor acknowledgement. We recognize that the City of Bloomington sits on native land. The city, as well as the city administrative buildings, are on traditional homelands of the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people, and we acknowledge they are past, present, and future caretakers of this land. We also acknowledge that much of the and development in Indiana, and specifically Bloomington, resulted in the unpaid labor and forced servitude of people of color, specifically enslaved African labor. We acknowledge that this land remains home to and a site of gathering and healing for many indigenous and other people of color, and we commit to the work necessary to create and promote a more equitable and just Bloomington. We move forward knowing and acknowledging our rich, complicated, and sometimes painful past so that we can learn from it and create a true land of opportunity. I want to thank you again so much for being here tonight. I want to thank our audience, our speakers, our panelists. I want to give an extra special thanks to the Arts Alliance of Greater Bloomington and Constellation's Screen and Stage. They are the ones who really organized this. And I want you to know these two entities aren't just putting great art into the world, they are fierce advocates for keeping Bloomington arts visible and well-resourced. They really put the fire to my butt, y'all, so they really deserve it. So I've been thinking a lot about how to approach the arts with everything going on in the world. I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And where I have landed is just the fact that the arts, and Bloomington arts specifically, are transformative. They educate us about forgotten histories. So for example, the North Star Hoosier Line Arts art installation down at our Switchard Park reminds us that the Underground Railroad went right through Bloomington. And local performance groups like Resilience Productions help reinforce the importance of histories like this through reenactments that celebrate the contributions of African Americans to history. And then, of course, we've got the Bloomington Early Music Festival that explores underrepresented groups, including women musicians in women, musicians in Arabic-speaking regions, and those who live in exile and early music making. Shout out to their festival, starts later this week. I also think Bloomington Arts teach us about things that are widely unseen. Cicada Cinema focuses on screening a wide spectrum of films, from the most thought-provoking cinematic masterpiece to the campiest of cult classics that you won't see at multiplexes. And then Aaron Toby's Science of Scale mural next to Waldron Wonder Lab shows us how tiny nanoparticles interact and fuse to manifest the world we see around us every day. Bloomington Arts are transformative. They reshape how we see and experience the world, and they unite us as a community. The monthly Bloomington Poetry Slam brings campus and city together to share their experiences and the world through sharp words and lyrical turns of phrase. The Live at the Buskirk Chumley Theater series invites us to celebrate emerging artists making new music in our community. And on the first Friday of every month during Gallery Walk, Bloomington residents and visitors embark on a hallowed route marked by more than 10 venues that showcase excellent artwork. When it comes to the arts, Bloomington is doing a lot. I can't keep up. How do you expect me to sleep on the weekend, y'all? Not that one. So it is my duty to make sure our artists and arts organizations have the resources they need to make this awesome, transformative work that inspires and unites us. It is also my duty to make sure that this work is reaching the largest population of folks possible. So if you've seen me speak before, you know at this point in the talk, I would just ramble off all the programs that I'm working on, and then I would talk way too much about how the sausage is made in City Hall. We're not going to do that tonight, because tonight I am here to listen. I'm here to listen to what our past and present leaders have to say about where we are, how we got here, and what we need to level up. What's said tonight is going to shape what Bloomington Arts are able to accomplish in the very near future and potentially for decades to come. We are a dynamic community at a transformative moment, and I'm here to make sure we reach our potential. And I'm now going to turn it over to Mayor Carrie Thompson to share her thoughts on the role of the arts in our city. I'm happy to say that I feel more support than I ever have in this role since Mayor Thompson took office. She sees art's true value in placemaking and understands that Bloomington arts and culture play a significant role in the city's continued economic development. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Carrie Thompson.
You'll be relieved to know I'm not going to drone on and on as you expect from a politician, because Holly just said it all. Holly, thank you for all that you do, your incredible energy for the arts and for our city is really unmatched. And I am here tonight mostly to thank you for putting this together, but also to thank you for what you do every day for our community. Arts are what help us through these difficult times. As artists, I know I'm a hobby artist, I'll tell you, in the closet, although my great private artist mentor here is sitting right in front of me, Suzanne Halverson. But I'm a not-so-closet knitter and quilter and dabbler in all things fiber arts. And you know, the arts, and a writer, the arts help us process these times as artists. And your gift to our community is that you help bring our community together in these times. And you also help us notice the things that others may just walk by. You help us take the time to see the beauty that exists around us every day, and you give us something in common that we can share with one another. Whether or not we agree on a faith or a political spectrum or anything else, the arts are something that we can experience together and each hold our own experience around respectfully. And so I'm grateful to you all for what you do for our community, because indeed, our community would not be Bloomington without you. And it is the arts that really helped me understand Bloomington was special 30-some years ago when I rode through on my bicycle just for 36 hours and decided this was the place out of all of the country that I wanted to live. I want to spend a few minutes talking about my administration's commitment to the arts, but more than that, I really do just want to say thank you. The people in this room and the amazing work you help make Bloomington unique and the wonderful place that we are able to call home. You shape our culture, you shape our economy, and our future. And so on behalf of all of our neighbors, thank you for all you have done, and thank you for all you will do for Bloomington. It won't come as a surprise to anyone here that the art and Bloomington are intertwined, not just to us as community members, but to our state and to the nation. And in my administration, that will not change. That's not only because this community values the arts, it's also because the arts routinely provide a high return on our investment. For instance, when funded through government, the National Endowment for the Arts finds that a $9 return for every $1 spent on the arts. That's an incredible number. In Bloomington, we feel that. Here, we know that the arts bring money into the city, they keep money in the city, and they provide 3 times as many arts-related jobs as similar-sized cities. The arts are a big business for Bloomington and core to who we are and what we will be in the future. That's why in 2023, the city, through the Bloomington Arts Commission, gave out more than $140,000 in grants to almost 100 artists, arts groups, 501c3s, and emerging artists. And we're poised to grant $150,000 this year. This year, through our 1% for the Arts Ordinance, which mandates that at least 1% of any city construction project's budget be allocated to the arts, we are excited to install 2 new pieces of public art. OT 987 in the Trades District by Berlin-based artist Stefan Rice, and an installation in Hopewell Commons by a yet-to-be-determined regional artist. We are investing about $350,000 and can't wait for them to be complete. In addition to public art, the city has also invested in places to create art. In 2022, the city forged a deal with Constellation Stage and Screen to manage the John Waldron Arts Center and invested approximately $500,000 in repairs and upgrades to the facility before Constellation took over the space. We are deeply grateful to Constellation for this partnership. We're currently in conversations to increase the amount of annual investment in this facility, as well as the Buskirk-Chumley Theater, which is also owned by the city and managed by Buskirk-Chumley Management Incorporated. We're also looking at new ways to expand our program to give affordable studio space to local artists. We're excited to partner with the Arts Alliance of Greater Bloomington and Indiana University's Arts and Humanities Council to create a web-based platform for artist resources. This won't be just a way for people to learn about the arts and events. Instead, we envision this being a one-stop shop for artists interested in local and regional grant opportunities and commissions, for opportunities to exhibit and sell your work, and for residents to learn where to take classes. Also, upcoming this fall, we're excited to launch a series of professional development classes for emerging artists, focused on things including grant writing and portfolio development. And finally, we're exploring options to launch a new cultural plan for Bloomington. With everything we do, as that moves forward, we will partner with you and with regional experts to help determine the top arts and cultural needs in the city and co-create a plan to invest in meeting those needs. And what we learned tonight will be a good start to that conversation. I'm excited about our city's future and the role the arts community will play in it. We have a great many challenges to face, but by having open and honest dialogue, by inviting everyone to the table when plans are made, and by staying focused on the mission at hand, I know we can and will create an even better Bloomington. And you will all be central to that. Indeed, we had to bring more chairs out to have this conversation. So thank you for all you do, not just for the business side of the arts opportunities, but thank you for bringing our community together in ways that we can express and notice beauty around us.
Thompson, legend, of course, arts organizing guru. Sally Gaskell came to Bloomington following a career in cultural planning, arts grant making, and arts lobbying. In Bloomington, she directed the Bloomington Area Arts Council for 5 years, then spent the rest of her working life at IU as director of SNAP, a national arts service organization in higher education. She's currently a board member of Constellation Stage and Screen, Voces Nove, WFIU, WTIU, and SNAP. Her work in Bloomington has helped provide the structure that Bloomington Arts rests on today. Please join me in welcoming legend, of course, and I promised I'd say this, local badass, Sally Gaskell.
In public, thank you, Holly. So, my role tonight, for 5 minutes or so, is to briefly talk about the history of local government, AKA public, support for the arts in our fair city. So, I'm here to tell you, we've come a long way, but we cannot rest on our laurels. Number one thing to remember, there were 3. Number one thing to remember, for many years, the city of Bloomington was really reluctant to dip its toe into arts funding. The Bloomington Arts Commission, a city commission, like how many are there? 45 of them? But the Bloomington Arts Commission began in 1980, but for many years it had no budget and pretty much did not do cultural policy. They commissioned postcards. If you've been in the McCloskey room at City Hall, those beautiful postcards were Patty Pizzo's project, and that's what they did for many, many years. But also in the 1980s, the City Council established the state of Indiana's very first Percent for Art program. Its home was then in the city's Department of Public Works for about 20 years with minimal staff support. Natalia is going to be speaking about the Percent for Art program in a little bit, but just to say it's much happier now that we have a new department home for it. The Bloomington Area Arts Council, which I managed for 5 years, also began in the 1980s as a way to grow the arts in the community outside of Indiana University. It was a private, not-for-profit, with no city support. And it was the BAAC, the Arts Council, not the city, that took on the restoration of this building, Bloomington's original City Hall, and transformed it into an arts center on no budget in the 1990s. Susanna's, yeah. It was before my time, but I know that it was no budget. And the BAAC also renovated the old Indiana Theater later in the same decade, the end of the 90s. The BAAC was, by the way, by far the largest single arts organization then in the city by both staff and budget size. Now the theater, now known of course as the Busker Chumley, ultimately did not go well for the Arts Council because they spent more money on the renovation than they raised, about $1 million more. So, in 2000, then Mayor Fernandez put together, and this is when I got to town, then Mayor Fernandez put together a Blue Ribbon Study Commission to save the Busker Chumley Theater. The city ultimately decided to separate the Arts Council from the Busker, and as part of that, the city committed to a modest annual stipend for the theater, as well as capital funds to fix things that needed to be fixed in that space. So many of us at that time said, yay, and finally, but if you were around then, you will know that there were a lot of people who were vocal in the community, especially libertarians, who felt this to be a horrendous use of tax dollars. So remember that. The BAAC continued to manage the Waldron through the decade of the aughts with no city support. And ultimately, I believe that's what put the Arts Council out of business because it could not afford to manage this 10,000 square foot building with no local government support. So the BAAC, the Arts Council, went out of business in 2010, and from its ashes rose the Arts Alliance. And honestly, it's a true credit to this volunteer organization for carrying out some of the functions of an Arts Council, such as managing this advocacy event. Thank you, Henry, and thank you everybody else here who works hard for nothing on behalf of the Arts Alliance. Now, back to the Krzan administration, which followed the Fernandez administration in the city, something big happened. He created the Department of Economic and Sustainable Development in 2007. And as a part of that, the city gained its first and only professional arts director in its history. The full-time person who was first appointed was Maya Michelson. And then with the new Hamilton administration just over 8 years ago, the Bloomington Arts Commission, City Commission, felt the need to advocate to continue that really valuable arts staffing. And to the Hamilton administration's credit, they did. We hired Sean Starowitz, who served in the position for 5 years and was replaced by Holly Warren. Over these last few years, a lot of public art projects were initiated and the grants program budget increased significantly. By the time the pandemic happened, the city understood that our nonprofit arts organizations and our artists are important community assets that need support. So, really critical. Significantly, the arts then received, and are still receiving, ARPA funds. That's the American Rescue Plan funding from the federal government from the city's pot of ARPA money designed to help it emerge out of COVID. And now, honestly, hurrah for the Thompson administration. I feel that the city's support for the arts is cemented. For example, I didn't feel the need to advocate this time for the continuation of Holly's position into the new administration. So we've come a ways. We've come a long ways. And my number 2 thing to remember, finally, is that today, in 2024, I believe that the city believes that artists and arts organizations are vital to our city's quality of life and economic development, and they deserve public dollars. We've heard mayors say this before, but I believe it now. Put your money where your mouth is. And so what I've seen so far with the new Thompson administration is that the city listens and responds to the needs of the arts community when they know what those needs are. The city does a lot. So I've been doing this work for over 40 years now, and what I know is that for nonprofit organizations and artists to be sustainable and effective, to keep doing what they do, they will always need local government support. And of course, it's a changing landscape. I'm looking forward to hearing from the panel tonight. New needs are going to always be developing. So the number 3 thing to remember is, as arts advocates, we cannot take anything for granted. We must consistently deliver clear messages to our elected officials, in this case, the mayor and council. This is a small town. They are accessible. Don't be shy. Invite them to your events. Thank them in public for their support, and make sure that they know what your ongoing challenges and needs are. So, should I review those 3 things? Number 1, it took a long time. Number 2, it's a lot better now. And number 3, don't take it for granted.
Thank you, Sally. Well, this city has some pretty incredible young leadership, which we may not always realize in the arts. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Natalia Lamanza. Natalia is currently the program coordinator at the Indiana University Arts and Humanities Council, and a part-time graduate student pursuing an MA in Arts Administration. Natalia is originally from Chicago and moved to Bloomington in 2017. Since moving to Bloomington, in this short amount of time, she's become involved in many arts organizations, like the Girls Rock Bloomington, Secretly Group, Vulture Video, Bloomington Gallery Walk, Lotus Festival, the Bloomington Arts Commission, and more. She currently serves on the board of the Arts Alliance for Greater Bloomington. She's chair of the Public Art for Bloomington Arts Commission. She's a camp coordinator for Girls Rock Bloomington and is the chair of the Bloomington Gallery Walk. Please welcome Natalia.
Everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak tonight. I serve as the ghost of Bloomington Arts Future. That's what I'm going to do today. As Henry said, my name is Natalia Mansa, and I'm a program coordinator at the Arts and Humanities Council. And while I do all of that, I know that I didn't intend to list my full CV here, but I think it helps contextualize the organizations I'm representing in these remarks. You might say I know a bit or two about the Bloomington art scene. I also know a little bit about prescribed Adderall, but that's different. Roughly 2 years ago around this time, I was sitting at the convention center during an arts feasibility discussion when the moderator asked, what can Bloomington do to attract and retain the young adult population that is diminishing in this town, and how can we cultivate this demographic to promote a more sustainable future for this town's art economy? It was in that moment that I thought, oh wait, that's me, and that's all of my friends that I see looking around here. And while I consider myself a stakeholder and an arts advocate, I should perhaps more interestingly consider myself and these friends a case study on retention. We are those hip, diverse folks in that sweet, sweet young adult age range that everyone talks about cultivating the kids, and we're the ones who stayed. I don't mean to dwell on age, but why does Bloomington, like so many changing cities, have a hard time keeping young folks like us around? And why did I specifically stay in Bloomington? I can't speak to my colleagues' lived experiences, but I imagine it's similar. In 2021, I had the opportunity to move back home to Chicago post-grad, but I found something that I didn't think I'd find there. I found a unique community that was asking me to stay, asking us to stay, and encouraging folks like me to invest. When I look back on my Bloomington journey, I recognize that I have been fortunate enough to have several guiding forces and friendly faces who helped make this space my home and who invited me to have a seat at the table. Ed, Amy, I know you're here, Holly, Chaz, Martha, all of these folks encouraged me who, when they met me, I was like a 19-year-old teenager, to stay, and that was really impactful. And this invitation to engage changed my life. I knew I'd work in the arts somewhere and somehow, but didn't expect to be an arts practitioner in a space that is as supportive and communal as this one is. And when we look at the future of Bloomington Arts, I hope we can consider how we cultivate and inspire the next generation of artists, arts leaders, and arts patrons to plant their roots in this community. I'd imagine many of you might be involved in this art scene. Many of you have leadership roles within it. And when we talk about who has a seat at the table, I really encourage you all to look around and see who is there, but more importantly, see who isn't there. It is one thing to invite folks to join you, but a whole other thing to create an environment where they feel welcome and encouraged to participate. And will everyone accept your invitation? No, and I get it. We're speaking to the poster children of overworked and underpaid career paths. But an honest invitation to engage is appreciated, and I know I wouldn't be here if I hadn't received and accepted these invitations. So now that I have a seat at the table, I'm listening, I'm implementing, I know my colleagues are doing the same thing, and we're bringing all of these thoughts with us. So let's talk a bit about the current Bloomington art scene. Instead of comparing it to cities like New York or Chicago, I want us to acknowledge that we are not those cities, and we will never be those cities, and that is fine because we are Bloomington, Indiana, and you know what happens in Bloomington? Impactful, innovative, and dynamic arts experience happens here. We have incredible artists, arts organizations, and venues in this town, but I think I speak for many of us when I say that the future of the arts in Bloomington can benefit from an increase in infrastructure that will make this scene infinitely more sustainable for the current and future community members. I'll be honest here, if I hadn't gotten a job in the arts in Bloomington post-grad, I don't know if I would have been able to stay. It would have been really sad, but I don't know if I would have been able to do it. And I think we need infrastructure that will lead to sustainable careers in the arts. And I believe that we need access to equitable pay, affordable housing, affordable studio space, and affordable rentals for small businesses like galleries and art supplies stores, which I know a lot of the folks here have mentioned previously, and I'd love to hear that that's being worked on, and would love to see that continue and help create the sustainable arts career path that I see. Beyond this, I really believe that artists and arts administrators need access to professional development and higher education opportunities. And I know, again, my friends at the city and even my colleagues at IU are eager to collaborate with local organizations, but we can always do a better job of strengthening those ties. And you know, we can't forget about the kiddos in this town. While I don't have any of my own, I have plenty of colleagues who've explained to me the horror that is summer camp sign-up day. So we need support for accessible and affordable youth programming in this town. And when I think of the future Bloomington Arts, I think of groups like Girls Rock Bloomington. I think of the WFHB youth programming. I think of all of the kiddos taking classes at the Glass Center and at the Pottery House Studio. So I just want us all to remember that we're each other's best advocates. I love knowing you all and getting to work with you and having the opportunity to serve this community alongside the many passionate arts advocates in this town. And I'll leave you with what working with and being invested in a community looks like to me. To me, community looks like showing up to a Cicada cinema screening or an IU cinema screening and knowing that nothing about the film, but trusting that Asia and all the folks working in that are going to provide me with a great time. It looks like another summer of Girls Rock where our team gets to meet you kiddos, but also see the once little itty bitty campers play shows in places like the BCT and Orbit Room. It looks like new and thoughtful public art pieces created by local artists. And it looks like going thrifting and finding volunteer shirts from Lotus and Grand Balloon and Bloomington Pride. And last but not least, it looks like trying to go to one of the many Krogers in this town and running into all of you and realizing that I probably owe you an email. So that is what a bustling arts community looks like, and it's what I love about Bloomington. So by continuing to foster future-driven, community-centric collaboration, I think that we can create accessible pathways to the arts that will undoubtedly help sustain the artistic community that we are currently home to, but also that we want to further cultivate. So thank you.
How great it is to have people like you in our community. I'd like to invite the panelists to come up and take the seats. And now introduce Gabe. We're going to have a time of question and answer. And the 6 people that were out there standing remotely, we have now 6 chairs for you over here. Not even have a seat. Love the fact that we have no room for anything in. So Gabe Roden is one of our arts leaders that I admire and that he's admired so much. He's a nonprofit management professional with over 50 years in marketing, engagement, administration, financial management, and development experience, dedicated to the arts and the cultural sector. Gabe has served as managing director for various organizations such as the DPP, Boise Contemporary Theater, Cardinal Stage Company, but he now serves as the managing director of the new Constellation Stage and Screen, which resides, as you know, right here in the Walden Arts Center. Tonight, Gabe will moderate with questions from the 6-person panel, and then toward the end, we'll take questions from the floor. Let's welcome Gabe Roden.
My first order of business is to remove this lectern. I use cinema style.
You guys ever seen a lectern?
Please don't go. Please don't leave. No, but seriously, thanks everyone. What an amazing turnout. Really, thank you guys for showing up for the arts in Bloomington. I think we're going to have a really exciting conversation. Thank you so much to Natalia. Yeah, absolutely. Sally, amazing remarks. We really do have some amazing past and future leaders here in our midst, and definitely here at these tables. So I'm really excited to introduce our panel. First, we've got Ahmed Al-Awadi. Ahmed serves as the events coordinator at Buskirk Chumley Theater in collaboration with WFHB Community Radio. Ahmed founded and runs the Live at Buskirk Chumley Theater music series. He's also the founder of Burning Couch Festival and the student-led organization Music Industry Creatives, or MIC. Next to him, Danielle Bruce is a mixed media artist that spends most of her time working in theater. She's one of the co-founders of Resilience Productions, where she directs and designs original works inspired by historical events. Coming, Danielle. And then next to Danielle is Asia. Asia Essex was created in a dark room after being exposed to images from infinite worlds.
I didn't realize you were going to read this.
I almost cut that, Asia, but it was too good to cut. I had to do some trimming elsewhere. She is the co-founder founder and co-director of Cicada Cinema, which aims to spotlight the underseen, underscreened, and underappreciated. She plays saxophone with Technicolor Band, the Ben Cartha Fowler Project, and Busman's Holiday. She's also the first full-time director of WFHB's 3 decades-old youth radio program. Thanks for being here, Asia. And the next Asia is Suzanne Ryan Melamed. She is the president and CEO of Bloomington Early Music, a 20-year veteran of academic publishing. Suzanne was formerly the editor-in-chief of Humanities and executive editor of music at Oxford University Press from 2005 to 2020. I had no clue that you had a university press experience. I do too. We should talk. Mostly complain. Suzanne currently serves on the Bloomington Arts Commission and the board of directors of the Bloomington Chamber of Singers. Thanks, Suzanne. And then next to Suzanne is Andrea Sterling. She is the co-organizer and host of the Bloomington Poetry Slam. Facilitation is in her heart, body, and soul, whether that's in traditional classroom setting, a poetry night in a dimly lit bar, or a contracted workshops across the country as a DEI transformative justice consultant. Andrea aims to honor her Black feminist mentors in all facets of her work and writing. Thank you, Andrea, for being here. And then last but not least, Erin Toby is an illustrator, mural painter, and musician. Her work includes collaborations with Monroe County Public Library, Blooming Foods, the City of Bloomington, and Hopscotch Coffee. She's currently looking for the intersection between parenting, art, community, justice, dumbness, cleverness, and meaning. Thank you. I don't know how your head doesn't explode. We're going to spend the next half hour or so digging into some pre-prepared questions and prompts with our panelists to help hopefully illuminate the path ahead of us. We're definitely going to talk a little bit about where we are, but really this should be about where we want Bloomington Arts to be. I might address a question to a specific panelist, but after that panelist answers the question, anyone on the panel, feel free to chime in with your thoughts. And after this Q&A, of course, we'll open it up for a Q&A with you. So hopefully this is some food for thought. You guys will have some awesome questions after we get through the pre-determined questions. So I want to start off with Danielle. Danielle, you've been a part of the Bloomington arts community for over 30 years. Amazing. I remember meeting you when I first came to town, and I thought you were one of the coolest people I've ever met. You've worn a number of different hats along the way. Would love for you to talk a little bit about how the arts community has changed over the years, and what is your vision for what the Bloomington arts should become. And yes, please use the microphone if you should need it. I use my Steve.
Yes, right. No pressure. At least my Steve. Thank you, Gabe, for that question, and thank you all for being here. I have been a part of the Bloomington arts community, mostly in theater, for the last 30 years, and I've seen, as Sally was talking about, I've seen it really, it came to a point where it seemed like it was just going to implode and nothing was going to happen. And it was really a low point because there was so much talent, there's so much talent and so many people with such great resources, and nothing coming together, nothing synthesizing. And that was really a shame. And then I think there was a wonderful moment of really invigoration when Cardinal came into town and really took shape in terms of the theater community. I can speak to the theater community. And also there was a change in management at the BPP, which brought such incredible awareness for what the BPP did that nobody else did in this country. And it was a changing time, and to not notice that whether you were directly affected by it or not, it was happening, and you started to hear about people were going to the theater, and they were doing this, and they were going to do these shows, and it was like, wow, this is really happening. And so you really started to kind of sit up and take notice, and I think that my involvement and my investment in it was kind of scattered throughout some of that, but I really did witness it, and would love to see the course it was taking, the trajectory it was on, continue in that way, but not in a way that a way that's sustainable, a way that we can say, all right, we have a lot of young people coming through this. I mean, we have to partner with IU, there's no doubt about that. I mean, that has to be a good partnership, but also to take not just young people, but take people who have been here and say, okay, you have incredible knowledge, you have incredible experience. They're the people we really should be drawing from, as much as I know the youth is absolutely what's going to happen next, whether we like it or not. But I mean, I'm on the panel, I think. But I think that it's really about the people who have been here and kind of fusing those worlds together. That's what I'd love to see happen, because without them, I mean, we need their wisdom and their experience. So that's my take.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else like that now? Great, I'm going to move us along, so we got a lot of questions here. When I came to Bloomington in the mid-2000s, there was this really thriving local music scene, which seemed to really, at least for me at least, drive Bloomington's arts and cultural identity. There never seemed to be a lack of local music offerings and venues. However, it feels like we've lost a lot of those spaces over the past 20 years. Ahmed, are there specific types of venues and spaces that we're currently lacking, and what are some other things we need to do to reinvigorate and empower the local music?
Sure. So I've lived in Bloomington for about 5 years now. I actually just graduated from IU last May with a Bachelor's of Science of Arts Management from SPIA. So my context is somewhat limited. I haven't lived here since 2004 like you, but I do also, I noticed that like there's not a dedicated all ages space here in town like other similar sized towns have. Or even there's a lot of where live music is mostly happening happens to be either in spaces that are inaccessible to most of the public, you know, private property, or those DIY venues. Or it's going to be in a bar, or it's 21 plus. So yeah, just there's also a divide between spaces occupied by townies and students, and that's really shown in audiences. Even at some of the shows and productions I see, working events at Buskirk Chumley Theater, it's either crowd for most of those shows. So I feel like what's needed to really get more regular live music is space that's going to be more all-inclusive. So something that I personally tried to program was with this Live at Buskirk Chumley series is utilizing that space to showcase artists that might cater to both crowds.
Now, do you want to talk a little bit about Live at Buskirk Chumley?
Sure. It's a monthly series in collaboration with WFHB, and pretty much there's no set kind of headline or anything. It's just 2 artists on 1 bill. It's really any genres go. Like this month we have a jam band. We'll have like some bluesy stuff coming soon. We've had like more indie rock bands. I'm looking forward to having like R&B, hip hop, soul type music as well. So yeah, just something for everybody, every taste of music.
Anyone else like to hop onto that? Or, yeah, Suzanne?
Yeah. Is this on? Yes. Jake's, Players Pub, Bears Place, Max's, and then King Doe, all these places closed down. There's nowhere for local bands to play. Bishop is an amazing spot, but they don't necessarily want a lot of people there. All ages is really important. I think my husband and I recently found ourselves with a high schooler and realizing that there's a serious disconnect with that age group. We see a lot for younger set, right, younger than that, and then college and up, and then we don't see anything for the like 13 to 18 crowd, right? So I think that's an important thing. And the other thing, in terms of the venues that are available, in terms of various genres, with the festival I run, we're at capacity at Far Center. We have about 150 people come for each concert. We were definitely against fire code at Trinity last year. We had about 200 people jammed into that place. There's nowhere else for us to go because we're not at a capacity that we can fill the pavilion, right? There's nothing in that in-between space. And then if we were to jump up to Buskirk size, we can't afford it. So as much as we're always told you have to grow, right? We can't. So that's because of that. So we have the issue with rock bands and early music. There's nowhere for either.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Yes, Andrea.
So I would also add, and this will come up again, me talking about multi-pronged efforts as we think about what does it mean to create more inclusive spaces, to have more diverse spaces. But with bringing up the lack of all ages venues, this is my first moment to bring it, which is that I think that is crucial and important. I think a lot of the things that have come up already that we've heard and that will continue to come up as we're up here, these are all really critical things. But we also have to consider what it means to bring folks into spaces that are not necessarily prepared for them, and how considering that is a part of what we should be thinking about too. We know that there's no such thing as a safe space, because there are so many different things that might affect us, different histories that we're coming in with. But we also have to consider, how do we create safer spaces? How do we have venues that feel like they are as safe as they can be, right? Especially if they're venues that also serve alcohol and have different things like that. So if we're going to have all ages venues, or we have certain nights that are all ages, which usually just means 18 and up, which is not all ages. But what does that also mean for those venues to have something set up where if something uncomfortable happens, if something inappropriate happens, the staff feels trained, that the participants know who they can go to, right? The audience members who are there, or the performers, any of those people. And so then also thinking about where and how we're allocating money, I think it is important for that to go directly to artists, definitely. But as we're also considering, and Natalia brought up, what infrastructure means and could be, some of it is in that type of training. How do we ensure that the venues that we are lifting up are training their staff, are trained themselves, and are elevating that? I think that would also bring people to spaces that they might not know if they would feel comfortable, or if they do feel safe there. But what is it for a space to like have that? What is it for the city to help incentivize certain venues to go through those types of trainings and to really elevate that in their own marketing and promotion, so that people can think, okay, I can actually go to this space. I know that I will be taken care of as well as I can be there, especially for folks who might not feel as home in Bloomington as everyone else does.
Quickly, I worked at Rhinos before it closed, and it's important to remember, I was the visual arts program director, and it was a youth center that did after-school program during the week, and then on the weekend it had like terrible, wonderful metal shows and all ages shows, like where kids could play with their bands, and also I saw like Neutral Milk Hotel there. But all to say, when I worked at Rhinos, I was a employee of the city Parks and Rec department. So I got my first aid training from the city. Like, that's just an example, I think, of what you're saying, of like, that was infrastructure where the city was paying and training the staff at this after-school program, and that worked really well until it didn't, because the city didn't own the building ultimately and didn't have a say in that decision, but that model is something to consider.
Yeah, Andrea, I would love to follow up. In terms of interdisciplinary collaboration and the types of work that like can happen across disciplines, I feel like you've got a lot of experience kind of working in those zones. Do you feel like we're kind of siloed as an arts community? Do you think we can foster more of that? And if so, like, what's a vision for like a project that could unite us under a space that you kind of described earlier? It might be, I don't know, too heavy of a question. I'd love to hear more from you.
A project that we
Yeah, yeah, just solve that problem, right?
Yeah. Well, I do think that something that would be really useful, and right now, I was kind of talking about it earlier with some folks, so DEI is often like used so dog whistly now, which is tough because that is an important field to me. But we know why it's become this dog whistle. It's taking over from the place of affirmative action, which also is deeply misunderstood. And so I think having something where that is centered, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. I love DEIJ, prefer that. But then really being purposeful about what that inclusion means. Because one, it doesn't mean just bringing potentially vulnerable people into spaces that are not prepared for them. That is how you have the draining of folks. They come in, they don't feel comfortable there, or it's a lot of work to continue to make that space, a space that they were told they were invited to. And then having to do so much extra work, that greatly increases burnout and the speed of burnout. And sometimes that burnout doesn't just take them out of that particular space, it might take them out of the city itself. And so that's something we would want to avoid. So doing some type, or figuring out some kinds of trainings that we can do, not just within the city in rooms, but how do we connect them, again, to certain venues? How do we connect them with people who are doing bookings, are doing these kinds of things? And then thinking about different collaborative projects that are possible, right? Different styles of community workshops that are available that can be free and open, and that would engage with the arts, because that is such an important part of critical thinking that often gets left out of the conversation. Like all of critical thinking, what it is creativity. It's being able to think about the different connections and how they can connect, different ways that we can present the ideas that are in our minds, whether we're doing that through words, through different visual aspects, through music. So kind of considering what that kind of project could look like. How do we, if we want to tap into IU, if we're trying to tap into the high schools and the middle schools and what's happening there, how do we have it at different age levels as well? So we're all a part of this conversation, and maybe having something where there is something created after, a type of quilting of our ideas, being able to have like a product that represents that, something that's also regular. Not something we do once and then it can be like our brownie badge, but what is something that we can do consistently and have people come back to and learn again and again from.
Awesome. I hope Holly and the mayor took some notes. That sounds awesome. And you kind of were touching upon messaging and how we get people into these spaces. And I was just wondering, I wanted to know from Suzanne, from your perspective, what needs to be done to improve messaging and marketing of the Bloomington art offerings? You know, does new infrastructure need to exist to support the development of new audiences for our work, or what needs to happen there? Because we do a lot of stuff, and sometimes I don't see nearly as many people in these spaces as should be.
That's a tough question. I think on some level it's a matter of not necessarily telling people they're welcome, but making it clear that when they get there, there's going to be something they're interested in, something that relates to them, something they can engage in and participate in, and truly feel a part of, rather than just watching and saying, oh, this is what they do. I had an interesting exchange. Last year, I went to the public library and talked to the director of the El Centro Comunal. I speak Italian, not Spanish. Because last year the Bloomington Early Music Festival focused on Arabic, Iberian, and Latin American musics and the connection across them, whatever. And we were talking about how I wanted her to potentially help us verify our translations. We have all Spanish language on our website for all the materials. And I talked a little bit about the festival, and she said that was really exciting because she thought the people that she serves, which are recent arrivals, mostly immigrants from Latin America and Spanish-speaking countries, she said, you know, people from the university come in and say, oh, this is for you, this is for you, and it sounds interesting, but it's on university spaces, and they said they do not feel welcome there, they don't want to go. They say, that's nice, that's not for me. So it was really important for us to move our festival into spaces that people could access and felt comfortable in and felt welcomed in, and even if they didn't graduate from IU or if they didn't, you know, whatever. So I think that's important, making sure things are in the right location that people already gather and feel comfortable in. And that needs to be in your marketing. Right? I mean, I use all this rhetoric in grants, of course, right? Where the community gathers together and feels welcome already, blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, there's truth in that, right? And you need to, you're not going to say, where you already feel comfortable. You know, you're going to say, this is at such and such a venue, when you know already that's where people across groups go.
Anyone else with any challenges of messaging or marketing that you'd like to talk about or bring to our attention? I feel like it's just like ongoing challenge that we, especially in a transient community like this, where there's always a churn of new people coming in.
Props real quick to Chaz and Holly at the city for their emails. I feel like Chaz's emails that she sends that kind of accumulate grant opportunities and events. I think that's been really awesome, and the database that they're working on,
Yeah.
just thumbs up to that. I think that's been really helpful for me personally.
Keep up with that database. Asia. We just talked about the university. You worked at the University of Cinema, and you're also working with Cicada and your arts leader that everyone's, I think, really familiar with. How has the collaboration between IU and the local arts community evolved over the years you've been involved in the arts community? And how can IU and the arts community collaborate to promote either collaborative projects or more work here in the
Well,
I thought you might have some opinions.
just see my axe that I have sitting in the back of the rhinestone. No, the way Bloomington and Bloomington and IU have a symbiotic relationship. People come into the university and they make one of two decisions. They're going to leave the city and go off, start their careers, start families, whatever. Or they stick around for many other reasons. Are you sticking around because it's easy to and you have friends here? Are you sticking around because you had a job and the job was paying well enough? Or are you sticking around because there were actual fun things to do in town that you could afford and they were happening in abundance? And that symbiotic relationship over the years is, I got here in 2008 and graduated in 2012, and I was definitely I stayed in Bloomington very specifically because of the Indiana University Cinema under the leadership of John Vickers. And there are many such cases for that, be it the theater programs, the music programs that happened, whether they be things like the Grand Falloon or shows that were happening on campus or whatever. There was always something happening that you could say, well, at the very least, these big acts or interesting things will be coming to town because of the university, and then there are also interesting things happening in Bloomington itself. And so the relationship between Bloomington and the university has always been a push-pull. It's never perfect. It's a lot like art and commerce, but you toe this line. But over the years, for many different reasons that I could say, obviously, the past two presidencies have been either all bad or had ups and downs. IU presidencies. All presidencies. That was amazing.
Did you pull out your MAGA?
Over the years, though, that relationship has shrunk for many different reasons. One, the relationship to Bloomington and IU. I will just say it. Bloomington's not a particularly cheap place to live. You graduate from here, and if you get a job, you cannot afford rent here. I moved here in 2008. I've been here for 16 years. And I was probably near the tail end, but still pretty good prime time spot of people would move to Bloomington because you could basically work your part-time job and do your art. You're either moving from a bigger city, you had been priced out or something like that, or whatever, or you were graduating from university and you were coming into the city and you knew you could have somewhere to land. I was in a two-bedroom house, not an apartment, a two-bedroom house that was $500 a month total, and it had everything included. That is an impossibility at this point. There is no place in town.
I want to see receipts.
Yeah. It's on 6th Street behind Hinkle's Hamburgers. So that is a major factor. If you graduate from college and you can't afford to live in the city, then why would you stay?
Right.
Why would you stay here? It makes no sense. Now, that's one of Bloomington's, many things that we need to solve as far as the relationship to the university. The university, and maybe Natalia can come back up and speak on this more, the relationship between the university and the city and the way that they fuel the arts into the city, that is weakened so much. I'm just gonna use the IU Cinema as an example. For all intents and purposes, the IU Cinema was Bloomington's community movie theater for, I would say, pre-pandemic, from 2010 till pre-pandemic. It was Bloomington's community movie theater. the AMCs both are awful. There was something that played interesting programming that everyone could get into. It was diverse. The biggest downside was that it was on campus and parking is bad and all of those other things. But it was like this thing that people would come to. I know for somewhat of a fact, and if there are any IU Cinema staff members or friends here, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But essentially, under the current presidency of Pamela Linton, I know there were initiatives that came down, essentially like crippled every arts organization at IU, where they were like, you need to be doing things that forward students' development within their degrees, whatever that means, like just gobbledygook words. And so what does that mean? Well, they have to cut down the types of programming they do. They have to aim more at students, but when you're just aiming at students, something like Ahmed says, like you're just only getting students to the screening. You're not having students and community members interfacing with each other in these public spaces and actually like getting to know each other. Like I stayed in Bloomington because of the IU Cinema, and then I got to know community members through staying in Bloomington and going to the IU Cinema. It was a symbiotic relationship, like I said earlier. And like, I think all of that foundation has like completely crumbled. Like, if you are coming to Bloomington, you're just like some East Coast person who wasn't good enough to get into the school out there or was too expensive. Okay, no, don't pretend like it's not true. Or your parents weren't quite rich enough for you to do it, and so you came to Bloomington where it was a little cheaper, a little easier.
The undergrad level.
Yes, at the undergrad level. And then you go to KOK, you get your degree, and then you peace out of here. And if you're someone who is actually interested in like the arts or something like that, why would you stay here? Yeah. That is the question I'm supposed to all do. What is the reason you would stay here in Bloomington? If you can't afford to live here, there's nothing going on. Yeah. Everything starts late. You can do the exact same thing in any larger city in the Midwest within a 5-hour drive. Why would you stay here? Why? Someone tell me. Yeah. Someone tell me why you would stay here after you graduate from college, from Bloomington. So yeah. So I think it's, you asked like a second part of that.
I was like, what can we do to foster that collaboration between the university and the community? It sounds like
one, the president needs to resign, which is to say one president needs to resign, a bunch of the board sucks. There's like there's a lot of different factors. Yeah. So once you get past all of like that political like gerrymandering and like all the grossness behind that, like you can actually talk to someone at the university, like, yeah, there needs to be some open means of communication, but also you need to make Bloomington look alluring and be affordable and have enough to do and eat and see and go to make it so that like after you graduate from this university, even if you don't get directly involved in the arts, like you are self-putting on galleries or playing in bands or whatever, like you want to become a patron. That is what I started off. I started as a patron. I just wanted to go see movies at the IU Cinema. I knew I was gonna be able to do that in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I knew I was going to be able to watch as many movies as possible in a community of people. A bunch of people I met tangentially through the IU Cinema and Vulture Video, like Dave or, whatever, like just many people in this room. Like, there's nothing like that anymore. Like, you just go to school and we peace out.
So it's like incentivizing the students to be able to get out of the walls of the university grounds and get into these spaces that hopefully are going to be safe and inviting and welcoming and inclusive.
And the support from IU needs to be like substantial. It doesn't just need to be a sponsorship or some flyers or something like that. Like it needs to be with their $2 billion dowry or whatever, like dowry, sorry. which I will be getting once I marry IU. But there is enough money that they can put it back in the city. I think you need to actually put that pressure on the university. Yeah. Like in addition to many other pressures that the city should be putting on the university, including the safety of the people in this town and its own students.
Does anyone else have anything to say?
Slay.
No,
I don't know how I followed that up. But, I mean, so I've lived in Indiana for 20 of my 23 years here on this earth. And Bloomington, like I said, for 5 years. But I really enjoy staying here in Bloomington because there's always something to do. I've lived in like Indianapolis and Evansville areas, and the art's there. the scene's just not the same. There's lots of young folks here. And as somebody who's kind of organized between the city, like resources and stuff, as well as IU resources with music industry creatives, programming a whole music and arts festival, it's really difficult to like make your case to, especially IU, and just like how the funding cycles work. It's really makes things super difficult to execute. But yeah, if they could just make things more, support the arts more, and just like Asia was saying, like very intensive effort, but definitely the administration's holding things back a bit.
We invited President Winton. She did. I don't know if he did. Thanks, Owen. Let's talk a little bit about funding. Aaron, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this. Since ticket sales earn revenue, as anyone that's tried to get an arts project off the ground knows, they rarely sustain those projects. We have to find other sources of funding. It's absolutely essential, especially when we're launching anything that's new or transformative in any way. Because you've done so much in the arts community, what are the current sources available to artists, and what needs to change in order for projects to get off the ground and remain sustainable, these new projects that we want to push?
I don't know if I have the most information about this, but I will say that grants from the city funded the majority of my work last year, from my mural work. I mean, and also I got an emerging artist grant to buy myself an iPad, like, and that money all came from the city. I'm just learning about how to find grants. I don't feel like I can speak to that, like, but I do know that subsidy from the city for the work that I am doing is absolutely, it's been really essential in recent years for me. I don't know, I feel, the fact is that I think we touched on this before, but it's like, most artists that is not their day job, you know, and they're not relying on the income that they're bringing in from their artistic and creative projects to, you know, to make their living. You know, they don't even.
Getting rich in the arts?
Yeah. Who is it? Is it you?
No one's making a living doing the arts.
Share the cheddar. Just to say, like, it's just as much, I mean, since I can't speak to grants, I mean, it's just as much about, you know, kind of the income that you can make as a bartender or in the service industry, or as a, you know, working in a nonprofit, or some people work at IU, but so many of us don't have the privilege of, like, who are contributing to this, what we consider our creative community. Like, it's not our day job. And so it does come back to wages, you know, wages and affordability. Like, there's a scaffold underneath it of what this, talking about what the city can do. I mean, it's about these grants. It's also about rent controls. I don't know. It's about, like, universal basic income for everyone in Bloomington. Just kidding, it's pie in the sky. Just to say, it's all so interconnected, and it would be amazing if you could figure out how to be, you know, I'm sure that someone with a bigger organization, that I'm sure you have, like, a lot of experience kind of chasing that money down, and who have, you know, people who have multi-person operations running, like Girls Rock. Like, Amy's great at finding grants and getting money, and that's part of her skill set. But a lot of us are just, you know, I'm just a guy, and I also have other jobs too that kind of have to pay the bills, so it's complicated.
It is. Because you said you're just now starting to find out all these opportunities and possibilities. Like, how did you go about doing that? What were the barriers? Was it you know, you got on the internet and Google Arts funding, or did you know someone that got a grant? And what do we need to do to make it easier for everyone to identify how they can fund these projects?
Talking about this, the email newsletter that Chaz sends out, I mean, that's a really great resource, like I said. I'm sure there are other things. I'm just not good at it yet. I've been working in the arts in Bloomington for a long time. I moved here in 2003, but it's only it's been like my post-pandemic, post having a child pivot to like actually try to work as an artist full time for the first time as a 42-year-old, and so this is all kind of new terrain for me. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's this cool program I know that Asia did last year, the Artist On-Ramp program that through the Indiana Arts Commission, I think, that kind of gives resources and scaffolding and money ultimately to artists, and that's a statewide program. I mean, that seems pretty awesome. But I don't know, just assuming that a lot of us, even someone who's been doing it as long as I have, are idiots about finding grants. Like, those resources are so important to connect us to those. Like, it's the kind of communicating that the folks in Holly's department do.
Thank you. Since we're at 15 till, I think, I would love to open it up to all of you for questions for our panelists. Yes, Melinda, I saw your hand come up first.
Well, this is just a comment on last fall, there was a meet the funders at the library, which was very helpful for finding funding. Plus, the nonprofit section of the library also is capable of being able to clearinghouse for finding funding. And so, the one that was held last fall was very useful. And so that's one of those things where with the Arts Alliance being able to share that between us and being able to know that I found this good thing, but how am I going to know that I'm going to meet each one of you and be able to tell you personally if it's a forum, if that's something we can do to have with the Arts Alliance where we can share that information better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just add, I think like 20 years ago, it really did feel like everyone was kind of backing into their own corners, fighting, and we thought we were fighting over this finite pool of resources. And I just don't think that that's actually the case. I think people want to fund projects that are, inclusive and big ideas and collaborative. And I just say, like, come to Constellation, go to Lotus, and ask for expertise from folks that do it for a living, and they absolutely help you. But we should be creating more ways for people to share that kind of knowledge and that funding. Because I'm always looking for funding. And there's probably stuff that you guys have found that I am unaware of, and there's probably a project we could collaborate on. So, yeah.
So this is a theme of mine that I've heard echoed from several of you. And despite what you're saying about louder. So I'm hearing actually one of my concerns from a lot of the panel. And one of those concerns is portable space. Especially for arts that aren't commercially sustainable and want to reach across media. And we can talk about, more grants and where do you find the grants, but at the end of the day, you're only giving away so much money and we're all writing grants for the same money. So if space is an issue, and space for smaller projects is an issue, whether that be under 200 people or under 100 people, and we can't afford to pay fees for these larger venues that need to support themselves, can we get regular space for artists that we don't have to compete for as much and write grants? So the grant money can go somewhere else.
Any thoughts on that from the panel? You like that idea? We found something possible?
Would you elaborate on when you say smaller spaces and leave the grants and the money? Can you talk about what you mean by that? Can you give me an example?
So several folks mentioned accessible spaces. So say you have a band that isn't going to draw 500 people, so you can't really afford to rent the bus or something. But you wanted to service multiple ages. You want it to be accessible because some folks might show up, might be seniors. Well, I love the Blockhouse. I love the Orbit Room. They've been great to many of us. They aren't accessible. And they aren't really all ages. They don't feel that inclusive. So if you're looking for these smaller venues where your audience is maybe 30 to 100 to 200 people, because it's not a commercial endeavor, where are those spaces and how do you afford it if you aren't paying for it yourself or you aren't getting a grant?
There's a lot of empty buildings in Bloomington that could be used for things that are constantly empty all the time, and they're just very empty. There's a whole section of the 4th Street parking garage. Nothing's in there. There are multiple empty buildings. This case cinema story is building in the old Halloween shop that the fire department uses. Why is that a different type of space at this point? These could all very easily just turn into multi-purpose, very free, very cheap, very accessible, because the city should make them accessible, spaces for everyone to use and not put anyone out. Like, there are so many of these spaces. How often is this fire day used?
It should be used way more than it is.
Yes.
Right now.
How are there not movies here every weekend? Like,
Is it not floor? I'm sorry.
One of the big things is not just for one space to exist, but there need to be multiple spaces, because having one means that everyone's trying to do one event at the same time at the same place, and there needs to be different spaces for all of these things, so that people can stagger events, and so that is a part of the collaboration also in the community of the arts. It's not just about, I'm doing this great event and everyone has to come to just mine. It's partnering with each other on our events, so we're not stepping on each other's toes.
I think, Philippa, I think I saw your hand.
I was just going to say, Artisan Alley, has anyone heard of it? Yeah. So that was one model. It was not performance space, although Stages Bloomington was in there. It was people rented spaces, but I mean, it was kind of a co-op, and it was really interesting. It lasted for quite a few years, but the pandemic kind of did it in.
So I've been here as an artist since 1976. Remember the Bloomington Area Arts Council when it first started. And there are some themes that we just keep recycling in life and in politics. But they're really all right here center again. So back in whatever year this was, late 70s, right across the street where the parking garage is, used to be the studio space for the performing arts. It was a building that had a restaurant in the bottom and had all these rooms, and we could rent it out. This is very beginning of Bloomington Playwrights Project. Exactly where we are in the conversation is exactly what was needed in the late 70s. So in many ways we haven't changed, and I'm fascinated with how it really parallels. We can't afford the rent here as people coming to want to stay, nor can we afford to be able to rent the spaces that are available to rent. And they're wonderful and they're fabulous, but they just are cost prohibitive. And to this point, the same people are renting them, so then it's really hard. We need space and creative thinking on how to do spaces. I keep thinking there's realtors, there's places that we could be doing, but then you have to get in, you have to get them coded, you have to be able to get seats in. We have a multi-age population. We have to be very careful to make sure that it's safe for everybody anyhow. So on behalf of Jewish Theater of Bloomington, by the way. So these are issues that have recycled over and over, and the city's done an amazing job growing and changing, as has Constellation. But these key issues must grow and think outside the box now, and look at all the people that can support it. So we need space.
Yep. Any panelists would like to reflect on that? Sorry.
Well, it's less specifically about the space, but it's the way of thinking. So now I get to say the multi-pronged effort thing again. But I think some of it also comes from, like, what do we actually do to divorce the idea of the art and artists as products and just as things to engage with and kind of view. And so understanding, again, it's why I mentioned earlier of, like, how do we weave in this understanding of artistry and creativity as being a part of our everyday lives, being a part of our creative thinking, being a part of how we engage with each other. And so kind of, I think that would also help remove some of the transactional nature that feels like it's so a part of this, of having to constantly be writing grants or figuring out how do we get people to come to this show or come to that show. It's just, how do we actually get folks in Bloomington, the ones who maybe would not even be in this room or watch the recording, to begin to really see and feel the impact of the arts in their lives. We've mentioned it already at the top of this event, art as transformative, art as the thing that helps get us through these tough times So we understand that, but there are also huge swaths of people who still just see it as something to kind of like view at a distance or something that's there to comfort them, but not thinking about their own part. And I don't just mean people donating money, but actually feeling this deep connection to the arts. And maybe that is having certain events. Baba Stafford, I do have to like mention you now because you're here. I was gonna mention the African American Arts Institute earlier because that is something that is connected to IU, that is arts focused, that also brings in all different types of people and cultures. But a lot of folks don't know, like not enough people know about what they do. And so what is it to have certain events where maybe we are bringing in the African American Dance Company, maybe we are bringing in things, even if it's not an art-centered event. But that's what intersectionality can look like in practice in a city. How do we weave all of these things together in any given event so that more and more citizens can start recognizing what is available in this town and how important and how pertinent it is to their own comfort and their pride in Bloomington. Being able to link the art in full to people's pride in the space, that would help, I think, create a lot more of that support that we're looking for. And having more people do the fight so that the artists who are working multiple jobs, who are trying to raise families, trying to live whole, holistic lives, don't have to constantly be doing it or feel like they're doing it mostly on their own.
I agree with what she was saying. I also want to say, though, that, in our situation, which is unique, we have forged these relationships with people in the community for financial support, for their endorsements, and we've had to go out there and really hustle and get out there and connect to them to let them know that this is what we're working on. We do want your support. We are part of this community. You are part of this community. Where do we come together? And it didn't happen overnight. And it was thinking outside the box. It was at venues that we didn't think we would be at initially. And I think that that's part of what we have to do to say where our lives intersect, where our art intersects, and then figure out how we can make it happen. And we've had amazing support, so we've been really lucky with that.
Kind of just to jump back to the spaces comment, because this is something I'm really passionate about, and I feel like we can't activate local spaces without asking for more money. So I took over O.P. Taylor's around January 2022. But essentially, I had to build that relationship over 6 to 7 months with the owner, and I had to incentivize it, and I promoted his company through that event. But there's places like the glass box space that's in between Amrit and Gather, that the whole building went out. Why can't we just have art there? To the right of the Shalom Center, there's a building that's been vacant for years. I called the owner. I'm a realtor, by the way, so I do make those calls. He told me he would not talk to me unless I was going to buy that space for $2 million or I was going to rent it out for $2 grand.
That's right.
And I know it's his property, but can the city come in and incentivize with a tax write-off?
That's right.
Or make a 501c3 charity function that then, okay, like a Crete Art Collective, that's my pop-up gallery, 10th exhibition at Backspace this July. Always free for everyone. But like, if we rented out that space, could the city of Bloomington give them a tax write-off for $1,500 for a month or whatever it may be? So nobody's technically spending money, but they are in some way. Like, how can we incentivize it to the people that we haven't built those relationships with? Because sometimes money does talk, but ultimately getting in with somebody is great. Or like the Walnut and 4546, that gas station across from McDonald's, I wanted to have a pop-up exhibition there so bad. It's like all you need to do is get the person to say yes, you throw up some paint, and you get flyers out, you got it outdoors. But
Kind of speaks to like we were talking about, like is there like a one-stop shop at the city where you can go, where you can like, I have this idea for this event, can you help me find a space, fund it, and that kind of thing. It feels like there's so many barriers and so many gatekeepers in place that like you can get so bogged down with all of that that you don't have enough time to make really great art, which is what we all want. Bob, you already.
So I'd like to talk about events, the kind of events we could think of that would involve a synergy, all the different arts groups, and also bring the city and IU together. So I was involved with the playwrights for 15 years. I've also been involved with Constellation Stage and Screen. And one of the things we've been talking about over the years is something along the lines of like the Banana Festival, where we have cinema, we have theater, we have music, dance, art. We should think of an event like that that would involve us pooling all of our resources and using all the venues we have in town
That would also be a financial boost for the city, but for the reputation of Bloomington as an arts center. And something we thought about, and I like it's got good intersectionality, the synergy, and we can think about events like that that will bring us together.
I'm just thinking about audiences. A few people have mentioned this is a small town. We are all serving the art scene in Bloomington. How do you, or does anybody have ideas on how to reach and connect with populations that are outside of Bloomington, or connecting sort of the Bloomington bubble beyond Monroe County into the rest of the state, or areas where so that the state can invest in art, and then Bloomington is known as sort of a mecca or a arts belt along Columbus and Brown County or something like that. So just kind of thinking of audiences and how that intersects with economic development and tourism, and growing the art scene to be really a broader idea than just the Bloomington community.
No, I think it's you.
Okay. So thinking about audiences is something that is pretty important to me. I have lived in Bloomington. It'll be 9 years in August. So I originally moved here from the East Coast.
But were you a Kelly graduate?
But and I work in town. I've worked at and do still work at different restaurants and bars in town. And I love going to events, and obviously I love Bloomington Poetry Slam. That's why I still organize it. But I don't always love going to events in town. I don't necessarily feel that comfortable or safe all the time, especially if I'm not going already with some of my own friends. And over the years here in Bloomington, especially my first several years, being connected with a lot of Black graduate students on campus, and then meeting other Black folks in town who a lot of people don't realize live in Bloomington, and learning how many people will drive to Indy and will drive to these other places to go to events that some of which we do have in Bloomington, but they don't know that or don't want to, just don't want to. And I think that it is really important to figure out how we can connect beyond Bloomington's borders, but I also think it's really critical to figure out how do we reach the audiences that are already here that don't feel protected or don't feel seen or don't see themselves reflected in the type of events or work that is available or that is shown, or also often feel, again, like that product. So I think it is important for art to show histories and all of these things, but also sometimes it can feel like a type of tokenization that occurs where it is we bring out different diverse populations and diverse art, and people are learning. And that's so great, but that is not actually a reciprocal mutual relationship. And so I think that that's partly in organizing the events and who we're bringing in, how we're reaching out to advertise and promote, but also, again, on the audience, on the participants. When you're engaging with something that's maybe outside of your own culture, outside of the art you tend to engage in, how are you engaging in it? Are we looking at things just as spectator, or what is it to truly and really be an engaged participant? To want to learn more, not just about the art that you're looking at, but that culture, but those folks, and not just as people beyond the glass. To really see them as a part of Bloomington community, because we can say that a lot, but in practice, I don't necessarily agree that that is what's happening. And so I feel really centering in a lot more energy in town on that and growing that audience that would be reflected. People would stop believing. They would tell some of their indie friends to come down, actually, for certain events.
Yeah, and I hate to put an end to the question and answer, but we are at time, so let's give a round of applause. We all go and continue the conversation. Should that be? But thank you to the mayor and Holly and Henry and the team at Arts Alliance.
gotten so much better. It's better now. Don't take it for